So I would say learn to use technologies like the ones that we're building, and there's just so many more that you can use to think of stories in different ways, collect them in different ways, and then now what we do with that is in the hands of creatives, and how we go transform the world together is in your hands too. So I don't think that human-led storytelling is going away, and I don't think that the need for strong writers is transforming anytime soon. I just think that we can choose which of these technologies are really valid and where to use them.
Welcome to the Storycraft podcast for storytellers. I'm your host, Meg Adams, and I'm here to help you explore how stories shape our connections. Wondering how stories help you network in advance? Looking to bridge online and face-to-face worlds, foster understanding, and ignite innovation? Look no further. Whether you're a leader, communicator, educator, or just love a good story, join us for actionable insights and real talk with professional storytellers, all aimed at helping you build stronger, better connections.
Well, I am just so excited to bring one of my friends to the podcast today, Katie Taylor. She is CEO of Narratize, which we are going to get into and talk to a lot about today. We're going to get to know you, and I'm just so grateful for your time and joining us to share your expertise on storytelling, Katie. So my first question, it's just to give the listeners some context about who you are and your background in storytelling. So can you tell us the short version of like how you became interested in storytelling and where your career has taken you?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Megan and I have been storytelling friends for, I don't know, more than a decade. It's
I
probably been
know.
like almost 15 years, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
Um, you know, I got into storytelling really through scientific, technical, and medical writing and communications. So as I was kind of coming up as a young professional, I decided to become a professor at first, similar to you, Megan. And so I did my PhD, and I focused in specifically on narrative science, or like scientific, technical, and medical writing and communications. And I fell in love with it. My very first sort of gig as a startup founder was in the US Department of Veterans Affairs. And I was in a strategic communications role. And the whole purpose was, hey, there's an access crisis across the VA right now. Veterans are dying on the wait list, and we're deploying systems engineers to transform the hospital's workflows to help patients see their doctors faster and save lives. And I was in such an amazing position right out of, like, as I was finishing my PhD, to go enter into that role and help to storytell around the very complex and interesting work of systems engineers, and essentially tell it in a way that helped everyone across the VA and outside of the VA understand it and be able to appreciate the engineering that was going on to ultimately transform human lives. And I thought, wow, look at the power of a good story to help scientists and technologists and engineers gain understanding in the world, and keep making the world a better place because of it.
That's incredible. And so can you talk more about how that instance, that story, that your first experience in seeing this work and seeing, more importantly, the impact that it had, how did you grow? How did your career grow from there?
Yeah, so that was like, right, I was just finishing up my doctorate program, and I thought at the time I'm going to be a professor, but I had started this company to go to serve in those kinds of customers. And so ultimately I had to make a decision. Was I going to stay in academia in a research professor kind of position, or um am I going to go lean into this startup? And I decided ultimately to be a startup founder and to go that direction. And that was about a decade ago. So that was my first company. It was called Untold Content, and it really hyper focused on innovation storytelling. So what's the relationship between communication and storytelling and the rate of innovation in the marketplace? How do people who are highly technical, subject matter experts, share their ideas in a way that moves them forward effectively inside a company and also inside the marketplace that they're meaning to serve? And so really grew my first company to focus on that. And over the years, we started working with more and more exciting customers. So we started working with just some of the most innovative brands in the world. And at that point, began concepting how do we transform their lives, the lives of product innovation and research and development teams? How do we transform them at scale? And 2 years ago, we became one of 7 developer ambassadors into OpenAI.
Mm.
And so ultimately, we started working with large language models in their earliest phases, way before ChatGPT was so, an everyday term. We were working with them and we were listening to customers and we're using this technology and we're starting to see there's a pathway here to marry the best in cutting edge AI technology with the needs of the most brilliant people inside of the world's most innovative companies. How can we pair these together to create a trusted co-authoring experience? And that's what we did with Narratize, and we built it in stealth mode the last 2 years. So I haven't really talked a lot about it. But we launched it in Q2 of 2023 after we piloted at NASA and Boeing, and those pilots went really well and it was exciting. So we launched publicly, and I've been, building and scaling and growing the platform and the team and working with our incredible customers ever since. So that's kind of my journey, really, from research professor to tech founder in AI. And
I
it's
know.
a bit of a rare, it's a rare kind of journey. It's interesting to share my story with like venture capitalists and investors. They're like, I'm sorry, you were a professor? You were an English professor? What? But it makes sense when you kind of recognize that what you and I studied is ultimately the science of narrative, the way that words make meaning. And that is at its foundation what large language models are built on. What's also fascinating, I'm sure we can dig into a lot more, is the responsibility that we can have around how those systems are designed.
Mhm.
Um, my company is extremely rare in that I have 2 other female co-founders. And in AI, that's completely unheard of. Like venture capital in general, it's already pretty abysmal to get funding as a female founder. But in AI, it's even more challenging. So anyway, happy to share stats and we can dig in more to what
Yeah.
that means for the future of AI and bias training and diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I'd love to talk about all those things, Katie, but I also want to dig into a little more about you said earlier, you had this point in your career where you realized you had a lot to offer and there was a lot of impact to be made in terms of helping people in this scientific and technical realm understand the value of storytelling. Because I mean, I think I come across people in that, like you said, engineers, right? Like that was your first, and they hear storytelling and they're like, "What about those things I read my children before they go to sleep?" So
Yeah.
how do you communicate, or how did you bridge those two worlds when you?
Formulas.
Yeah,
Formulas.
that's so
Yeah,
smart.
100%. Yeah, the first thing we did, we started identifying narrative algorithms, essentially
Cool.
storylines and patterns that showed up within different corporate contexts. So
Mm,
we recognized that there were certain patterns of story when an engineer or a product manager was going to pitch a future concept,
mm,
something like a helicopter takes you to work every day,
sure.
right? Or the cure to cancer, right? Huge
Mm,
transformational things that are hard to imagine today. There's a different storyline algorithm that tends to help them get buy-in for the next stage of development when they're pitching a futuring concept. And that storyline algorithm is very different than one that an engineer might use to pitch a systems improvement to an
mm,
existing technology or solution. And we started building this database, mapping different narrative algorithms to different contexts. And they're essentially formulas.
yeah.
One of the simplest ones that I love and is so robust, and it's more like a framework, it's called the ABT, the and, but, therefore. And once you learn it, you'll hear it everywhere. Every scientific communication, you'll be like, oh my gosh, the ABT. And
Yeah.
it goes like this. It's a formula and it goes, there's an ordinary world and there's something at stake, but there's this major challenge. Therefore, here's the proposed solution.
Mm,
You memorize these formulas, these algorithms, and in our case, we're training AI to help recognize it, to
mm,
help someone who's at a bench, someone who is actively trying to solve a critical societal or business challenge. And we help teach them as well as the AI what those algorithms are to help them be more effective and how they convey that solution. Because most technologists, like, they love the details, right? They're going to
yeah.
present a slide deck full of data points, and it's not necessarily going to convey to the business leader who's going to decide whether that project gets funded or moves on to the next stage of development, it doesn't help them understand it. And so when you and I say story, we think of all those dynamics. We think of tailoring it to the audience and to the context and helping the communication resonate and show impact while still being evidence-based. Like you and I are tuned to thinking that way. But for those who haven't studied it for decades, right,
Yeah.
they've studied all the principles of science and engineering and all the things they do every day. And that's not like another knowledge base that's in their heads. And so it's been really amazing to teach it through a language that those technical, brilliant minds understand and wrap their heads around, which is algorithm and formula.
Oh, I love that. And I think we're at a time, I mean, everybody listening knows this, but we're at a time where it is really critical that scientists, engineers, they are communicating better, right? That things are getting funded, that we are finding consensus among solutions to some of these larger problems that we're all dealing with as a society. So I'm just curious to know, do you have any like case studies or success stories that you can share with us over the years? Like any that stick out to you that are like, wow, you mentioned the VA, but this really made an impact. And here's where storytelling, or I don't know if Narratize has any of these available yet
Yeah.
that you could share with us.
Yeah, for sure. And then afterwards, let's share some more stories of the problem of this too, because those are really
Yeah.
fun too.
Yeah.
But I'll share some successes first.
Okay,
So
that sounds great.
last year, last year, Narratize partnered with the United Nations and the World Food Forum, and they run global innovation challenges. So 500 innovation teams, they could be startups, they could be inside of large organizations or nonprofits or companies, they submit to Rome to win research dollars. They're
Cool.
literally these incredibly diverse, multidisciplinary teams that are trying to solve world hunger through a million different ways. Everything from improved agriculture systems to watershed. And so they have to tell very complex technical stories and get research dollars. So last year, we invited applicants to that research program to use Narratize to write more clear and impactful pitches for their innovations. And 83% of the winners of those research dollars actually wrote their pitches with Narratize.
Ha,
So that was a really
so cool.
exciting outcome. And on top of it, they said that the impact was so much clearer from their work. They walked away with talking points and they were able to build the pitch in 20 minutes or less for a
Wow.
process that typically takes someone 20 hours or more.
Mhm.
They also rated it as 73% more accurate than ChatGPT. And that's really like we have three brand promises at Narratize. It's
Mhm.
speed, accuracy, and magic. And accuracy is the tip of the pyramid because we serve science, tech, and medicine. So
Mhm.
we can't deal with hallucinations and inaccuracies from large language models. We have to put guardrails against what they output to protect the uses of that technology. So that's a great
I love
story,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Teams, especially global teams who are oftentimes not first English speakers, like
Mhm.
first native speakers of English, they were able to distill their talking points and get the funding they need to literally try to go solve world hunger. So that's a great first story. And then on the other side of the house, it's fascinating all of the problems when this doesn't go well. So like a couple of the famous ones that we tend to like wake up on fire to share, the virologist who discovered that the HIV virus causes AIDS actually couldn't get the scientific community to buy in to his research. He was a pretty terrible communicator, and it took months longer than it should have for that discovery to resonate and get traction and acceptance. And the same thing happened, maybe on less stakes with the H. pylori bacteria that causes stomach ulcers. The physician who discovered that was so desperate to convince the gastroenterology community that he swallowed the bacteria himself
Oh my
and then
god.
got a stomach ulcer.
Oh no.
So we
Poor
we share
man.
these stories. We share these stories and Narratize like to remind the team to wake up on fire. There are critical solutions that are waiting to be told. And if we can empower those teams to tell them effectively, then we can make that innovation happen a lot faster.
Oh, Katie, thank
Love what you're hearing on this podcast? Consider booking me to speak at your next event. Dive further into the transformative power of storytelling with my keynote. Tell better stories, speak up, stand out, and build community. In a world that often amplifies our differences, my talk invites you to embrace genuine connections. Break free from the echo chambers and discover the art of storytelling. Learn how to share your own narrative, listen actively, and foster communities that flourish on shared experiences. Check out the show notes to learn more about how to book a talk for your next event.
Oh, Katie, thank you so much for sharing both ends of those stories. Like, I appreciate that so much because I said, like, in that question, it was like, it really is a critical time. There are so many, I think some of the communication technology can feel overwhelming to people. Like, there's just so many different ways that people are coming at you, say, oh, here's how you communicate best. Do this to communicate best. Why is Narratize, you mentioned different than ChatGPT, but
Mm,
what makes it work? I mean, like that, I mean, work so well because, and what I'm getting at here is like there is a human element to storytelling.
yes.
So how does it
Yes.
work with that, or how does that work to help?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
communicate.
So we call it human-led AI. Everything
Mhm,
that we do at Narratize centers around helping the human have a co-author that they can trust. So just
mhm,
like it's really amazing to be on this podcast and like you're asking incredible questions and you're prompting me to share my insights and to share my perspectives, that's how Narratize is designed to feel. It's designed to preserve the thinking work of writing.
hmm,
75% of the work of writing is just thinking. And so Narratize, where we've been most excited about from some of our users at places like Boeing and NASA, they've said, it preserved my ideas and helped me compile my thoughts. And then it expanded on them in a technically accurate way.
hmm,
Wow, that's so exciting. So, I mean, in terms of the how, we use a reverse chatbot experience. So when you log into Narratize, it's not like a blank screen and a blinking cursor. It's prompting you. It's saying, "What do you need to create today, Megan?"
mhm,
And you might say, "I need to get buy-in for a new technology that I just discovered, or a new therapeutic that seems that no one else has uncovered before, or I need to share a project update in a way that helps share some failures and lessons learned with my team." Things like that. Those are some of
mhm.
the use cases live in the Narratize platform
Sure.
today. And Narratize then knows what questions to ask you based on your need. And you answer, you fill in what you know, you share your insights, it asks deeper questions, and then it ultimately goes and co-authors that for you into a fully prepared pitch or white paper or press release or project update. And so yeah, it's really that human-led experience. The way we design the user experience of Narratize is meant to center around the person, but then people are fallible, just like
Yeah.
large language models are fallible. And so what I think is even more exciting and interesting is the way that we're leveraging the technology to put guardrails against what's
Mm,
output and what's shared. So we're calling into different academic databases to add evidence to what the user is saying, to
mhm.
contextualize it within their industry, and to place their voice into their disciplinary conversation. So excited about that. Things like the citation suggester help you get secondary source recommendations, help you see your voice within trends within your field. So those are some of the features that I think really, again, keep the human at the heart and soul of it, but add a layer of evidence to it. And then in terms of story, right. The way that Narratize prompts is designed to pull out stories from people. And then the way that we train the AI to recognize story patterns is also another key ingredient. So,
Mhm.
all of those algorithms that we mapped to different contexts, like what's the most convincing and clarifying way to describe this type of project or this type of pitch, or how do you navigate these types of decisions? We're training it to listen for those patterns and then help produce content within those patterns. So it helps someone who maybe isn't an expert in storytelling to still leverage the insights of storytelling, and then they see the output, and it there are all of their ideas, but just articulated in a very high impact way.
As a researcher, this just sounds so lovely. And I imagine to some people listening, they're like, oh my gosh, that is going to save me so much time and energy. And also, as you said, make the information that we're sharing again more trustworthy, like get it out to where we need to go, like you gave with those examples. But what would you say to people? Because I'm sure there are going to be people listening to this podcast who might be scared of this technology, who might be scared. We've heard I'm sure if you're listening, you have heard how AI is going to replace everybody's job. And as communicators, what if they're like, oh no, Narratize does all the work that I normally do? Like, what would you say to that person?
I would say that that AI has been part of our lives in a more invisible way for
Mhm.
years and years and years. Everything from the personalized recommendations you get when you log into Amazon to the things that show up, the coupons that you get on your grocery app, everything it recognizes and is based on AI. But the emergence and the huge uh, public awareness of it really took off last year in 2023 with ChatGPT, and it caused it to really come out of invisibility and become a more visible part of our professional lives. And I would say that all of us are now empowered to, like with any industrial, with any innovative revolution, it's absolutely a question of now what? So the people who used to make maps and those of us who used to like read maps before there was GPS, now there's Google Maps and Apple Maps, and we don't have to do that work anymore. It changes our lives forever, hopefully for the better when we deploy it responsibly and ethically. And so I would say to embrace the world that we're in. I would say learn everything that you can and accelerate your work. Um, Everyone has the ability to use this technology and to adopt it and embrace it as part of their work. I also think for those who are business leaders trying to make the decision about how to plan for workforce in light of these changes, there's an opportunity here to, I think, really think through how to train your people in introduction to large language models, introductions into prompting. But I also think it's unrealistic for leadership to expect every professional to become a senior level prompt engineer. That takes a lot of time and a lot of knowledge of the various language models and how they function and how to extract the most value from them. So, really, to revolutionize your workforce, you should absolutely train people and give them that empowerment, but also give them technologies that are embedded into their workflows. And that's how we've approached it at Narratize. Is our belief is that you can't train millions of people around the world to be senior level prompt engineers. I think there was a recent case study that showed a senior level technical writer put in 150 prompts to ChatGPT to get one like C minus level white paper. And, with Narratize now, you're able to go through, we launched the world's first white paper builder with
Mhm.
generative AI last month. And you're able to go through the process of like almost like a choose your own adventure style of prompting to put your insights into a white paper. So it's not that innovation dies, right? How might innovation thrive with a technology like that? Think of the 31 million entrepreneurs in the US alone. One in five people stand up their own company every single, like at some point in their lives.
Mhm.
And so imagine like this technology enables new and different kinds of work.
I love that. I mean, I think that's really a goal of our podcast too, is really figuring out how we can work together to co-create, meaning and negotiate meaning instead of what I'm hearing you say is I think like the better we communicate, if we can just learn to use these tools, the better off all of us are going to be to innovate and to come to consensus and to solve some of these very large issues, like you said, especially when we're talking about tech and medicine and
I'm a
like,
big believer that like those of us as storytellers need to insert our voice and our expertise into AI technologies. And so
mhm.
let's get back to what we started with, which is the abysmal statistics around who is developing AI and the
Yeah,
homogeneity there for a
yeah,
minute,
yeah.
right? Obviously, majority computer scientists, which is great. That's fine. And also, though, there's a massive amount of homogeneity. And AI, as it rolled out over the last decade, got a ton of criticism for the bias that it would output, for racist language, for
Yeah.
sexist language.
Mhm.
One of the first things we did at Narratize, because we are three women co-founders, one of the first things we did was build a knowledge base around diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender inclusive language, and discourse communities, because we wanted to make sure that what was output from the technology was far less likely to have bias,
Mm-hmm.
or to be sexist or racist. And so that's really critical to us. But not everyone running an AI company is diverse. In fact, we're absolutely the rare ones. So I didn't realize at the time that I was fundraising for the company from venture capital. It didn't come out until I think late summer of 2023. But the Turing Institute put out a research report that showed 0.3% of venture capital and AI companies goes to all women founded companies. And that's just the statistic for all women founded companies, not for other forms of diverse leadership that are so critical and needed in this space. 0.3%. So
Yeah.
I'm part of a 0.3% statistic. And that I think should set us all on fire and should
Yeah.
cause those who are in the position to adopt this and purchase, build, or buy tech stack solutions at the enterprise level, they should be thinking, how do I tackle our DEI imperatives alongside our AI imperatives that in a responsible and ethical manner? And then for those of us who are storytellers and creatives, how do we own and insert ourselves into the development of this technology so that we are creating the kind of world that is just and equitable for all. I feel really strongly about that, and we've leaned into, I would say, another thing, another great a good like path forward for storytellers to do that is to join like AI committees or
Mhm.
catalysts inside of your community. So I've joined the Cincinnati AI Catalyst, and together we defined what is responsible AI and what's the roadmap for it. We're applying for some grants together through that now and looking to really spark more global conversations around that in the region, at least of Cincinnati, and to cause that kind of as a catalyst for others.
What's the risk of not doing that, Katie? I mean, I think you're a woman in a room, like you said, 0.3%. I mean, what advice do you have to people who, like you said, are storytellers, are creative? You kind of answered this, but I'd like to dig a little deeper. Do you have advice to them? Like you said, you didn't realize it when you stepped in, but if now they're realizing it, how did you step into that? What are some ways that they can be empowered to get into those rooms, to get into those conversations? Because that's hard, I think, for people when you are the only minority or the only woman in the room.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, venture capital,
Yeah,
like
it's
trying to
just
raise venture capital in general, it's like 2% of venture capital still goes to women. It's abysmal.
crazy. Yeah.
And then yeah, 0.3 is a lot worse than that
Yeah,
even
I mean,
some.
I don't know if my face was captured, but I was like, I didn't realize that. But
Yeah.
there's a lot. I mean, we can get to that later. But yeah, I think I would love to hear from you as someone who is in those rooms. Like, what advice or how would you pep someone up to go
Yeah.
do it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's like two ways to answer that. One is how do those with humanities and storytelling backgrounds embrace AI? That's like
Yeah.
one piece of it. The
Mhm.
other piece is the very unique aspect of trying to build sort of a technology scaled company and getting venture capital to go do it. I can give
Mhm.
advice on either one of those, I guess, but um, do we want to go down which path, option A, path A or path B first?
Let's go down path A for because I think
Okay,
I'm gonna
that's what I
venture that most
figured.
listeners are
Okay.
gonna start there.
Yeah, definitely. So, a few different ways. One, if you're inspired, reach out to our team at Narratize. We're partnering with storytellers. We're partnering to infuse those insights into the platform. There are different creative ideas that we have for continuing to do that at scale. So, excited about that. I think at the personal level, I would get involved if there
Mhm.
are AI meetups in your city. What's amazing to me in the different AI meetups that I go to is you hear people using this. I've been told, not I've been told, excuse me. It's been called the great equalizer or the great
Hmm.
access gateway because now the ability to create a chatbot is in the hands of people who are non-coders. And so you could, as a small business owner or as an independent creative or as part of a creative agency, you can leverage these technologies fairly quickly. You can train them on your brand style. You can
Mhm.
play with them to try to create your own sort of chatbot, for instance, based on your unique knowledge base or your intake process for customers. There are a lot of ways to leverage it creatively. And a lot of them don't require tens of thousands of dollars of developer costs to do so.
Mhm.
So I would really encourage you to start with going to your AI meetups, going to your AI catalysts, listen for what others are doing, listen to podcasts like this. There's also one that I think you would love, Megan, and your listeners would love called Creativity Squared, which is all about creative industries and AI.
Nice.
So things like that. But then I would say too, embrace it as part of an opportunity to make your workflows more efficient.
Mhm.
So, I think as story collectors, we've both felt the pain of filling out surveys, like design, not filling out, designing surveys, and that being the main way to collect qualitative data,
Mm.
or going through the one-to-one intimate process of collecting someone's personal story. And there's nothing that can replace the human to human connection in collecting a story. But surveys try and they suck. And so like
I would like to like give a slow clap for that as a qualitative researcher.
I'm sure that's gonna end up being the tweetable tweet from this podcast episode is like, nothing replaces human interviews, but
No,
surveys try and they
they
suck.
suck.
And so, like,
Yeah.
there is a need, especially when we need larger amounts of qualitative insights, when we need
Mhm.
interview data and focus group data at scale. One of the use cases for Narratize is actually collecting more insights from people in very unique medical conditions so that the
Mhm.
medical community can better understand what their patient experience is like outside of the hospital.
Mhm.
And so we're partnering with some amazing organizations. I wish I could say their names because we haven't
No.
publicly shared that yet. But we're collecting, for example, with the Narratize technology, we created a feature called the Story Infuser, and it
Mhm.
enables you to ping one person or 1,000 people, ask them to answer a few prompts, and then it generates their story, and they can approve it or edit it, send it back to you. And
Mhm.
so we're using that. One of the first use cases is for patient story collection,
Wow.
specifically for children who've been diagnosed with heart failure. There's very
Mm.
little known about that. A
Yeah.
lot known about adult heart failure, but much
Mhm.
less known about pediatric heart failure. It's just a smaller
Mhm.
sample size. But there's the one-to-one human interview process, which is so important and so transformative for both parties to engage in. And then there's like survey data. And
Yeah.
so we're excited for things like the Story Infuser to be able to collect that at scale. So I would say
Mhm.
learn to use technologies like the ones that we're building and there's just so many more that you can use to think of stories in different ways, collect them in different ways, and then now what we do with that is in the hands of creatives and how we go transform the world together is in your hands too. So I don't think that human-led storytelling is going away. And I don't think that r- the need for strong writers is transforming anytime soon.
Mhm.
I just think that we can choose which of these technologies are really valid
Mm.
and where to use them.
Yeah, because we're right at the cusp of it, right? Like you said, though, I mean, AI in the form that it is, like in Narratize and ChatGPT, that's just brand new to all of us. So I'm sure there will be some exciting things that happen in the future in terms of storytelling. But also, what would you tell people at these meetings, like especially being a woman or a minority? What should they look out for? Like, have you encountered anything like that makes you stop and think like, hey, maybe this isn't how we should be using this technology, or I know we need all the voices at
Oh,
the table.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you've used ChatGPT and you've
Yeah.
tried to use it for anything that's remotely evidence-based, you'll know that you've been disappointed.
Oh
Like,
yeah, I get this on the other end as a professor now. It's very fun to see like I'm
oh,
like,
you can probably
I know ChatGPT wrote this in like 5 seconds of reading
I
it.
love that. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And the number of times that, it's misappropriated a quote or given the
Yeah.
wrong fact, like it's not trustworthy in that
Mhm.
way.
Okay, yeah.
So I think societally, there's a huge opportunity here to guardrail what LLMs output in
Yeah.
partnership with
Mhm.
peer-reviewed publications. Obviously, that's where we hang our hats is what
Mhm.
the scientific or the disciplinary community agrees is
Mhm.
true. And so rather than training on the World Wide Web, there's a strong case for guardrailing against what is output based on what other scientists and experts say. That's how
Yeah.
we've done it at Narratize, but I think it's a huge problem because a lot of users are just using it to book travel or write a
Mhm.
graduation speech, and then they go
Yeah.
on and try to find something that is true and factual,
Mhm.
and the LLM hallucinates. And what ChatGPT gives you is something that is not trustworthy, but most people aren't. There's not enough training yet for people to
Yeah.
know to look for that. So just like there was a deep fake of Biden's voice in the
Yeah.
primaries telling
Mhm.
people not to vote, that those are the really concerning
Mhm.
potential impacts of this technology when it's put into the wrong hands for the wrong purpose.
Mhm.
So I think that NPR made a great point, and I stand behind their same stance that we have to remain educated citizens with whatever is put in front of us.
Okay, we had to pause the podcast to let you in on this opportunity. If you're ready to elevate your brand storytelling, don't miss our training, Tell Better Stories, led by me, a seasoned television journalist and PR professor, and Kyle, an on-air meteorologist and video storytelling expert. This workshop unveils our secrets to craft compelling, personal-driven narratives that resonate with your audience. Learn our distinct approach that puts people first and brands second, leveraging 6 storytelling elements for maximum impact. Walk away with actionable strategies, tactics, and a clear process to replicate success in any organization. Check out the show notes to learn more about this offer or reach out to homeplacecreative@gmail.com.
Mhm. That's a great piece of advice. And I keep hearing you say the guardrails. What are and you mentioned this, but just to kind of reiterate, what are the guardrails and how are you setting those up through Narratize as opposed to like a chat GBT? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So ChatGPT was designed by a lot of computer scientists. At Narratize, we build like 3-part cross-functional product teams, development teams.
Hmm.
We comprise them of computer scientists, data scientists, and narrative scientists.
Hmm.
So together, those 3 groups who do not speak the same language, so it's really fun
Yes,
to
yeah.
build together. They come together in order to determine what's the data architecture for this use case. How do we one of the ways that we solve for hallucinations is one, the way that we prompt users, actually,
Mm.
that reduces intrinsic hallucinations.
Mhm.
But then also we call into different academic databases and suggest citations and try to guardrail based on what's already been published in the scientific community.
Oh,
Of
nice.
course, that has its own interesting challenges, and I
Mhm.
want to, like, all of us, I think, who are former or current academics or researchers are passionate about things like open source and the
Mhm.
speed through the challenges around the speed that science moves through the peer review process. It's a real problem.
Yeah.
A lot of the research that comes out from peer review was actually done like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's trusted information, but it's
Mhm.
often outdated information. And industry tends to move faster with its IP, but it doesn't share it because it's a competitive marketplace for that intellectual property. So if anything, I think there's a lot of opportunity for this technology to speed up the peer review process, not to dismantle or impact its quality at all. We have to maintain its quality, but how might this speed it up so that we can get critical, up-to-date research findings in front of people in the public as fast as possible?
Yeah. Oh, Katie, that's so exciting to think about. I just hadn't, when we first started talking, that just didn't occur to me that it
Yeah.
can help solve this problem as well. So there's a great example of just like putting yourself in a room or giving yourself the opportunity to have conversations about artificial intelligence and how you can use it can really open up a lot of possibilities. So before we wrap up, I do want to ask you part B, because I think this is really important for people who are not familiar with how to raise venture capital, how to, again, if we want to inspire them to be in these rooms, to be part of these solutions, what advice do you have for listeners in that respect?
Yes, I have so much advice.
Probably
Um,
not enough for this, but
so much advice, but I think learning to speak, l- lear- learning and understand what venture capitalists want and need is very important to your process. So I would read books like I would first read Founder versus Funder.
Okay.
Oh, it's really good. It really tells the truth around the motivation, the necessary motivation of the investor, right? In many ways, many investors are out to make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it's a math equation. It's
Yeah.
a problem of risk. And they have to make the right investments to protect their wealth and the wealth of the people who've invested into their funds. So what I would say is learn to speak their language as quickly as possible. Assess as early as possible whether what you're building is a scalable solution that is really primed for venture
Mm.
capital. And really that you can Google those things and find those things out. The best thing I did was get really rooted into my local innovation ecosystem.
Hmm.
So in Cincinnati, we have a rallying cry called hashtag Startup Cincy. I learned about it, a decade ago, and it's been my footing for the last decade as a founder. So if I had questions about how to raise or whether a concept was prime for venture, they were always there for me. And I think getting rooted in your ecosystem really matters. And know that you're going to hear 100 no's before you
Yeah.
hear like two or three yeses. And that to me, like, I don't know, that is brutal. But if
Mm-hmm.
you go in with that expectation, then you won't be disappointed. Um,
I've heard that a lot
so
lately in a lot of different contexts, Katie.
yeah, I mean, it's
Just don't have high
brutal.
expectations.
Yeah, but well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I would have a high expectations of yourself, and that way
Yeah.
it's like
That's
a gym workout that you don't want to do. Like nobody
yeah.
wants to feel like crap at the gym, but you have to do that some
Got to do the
days.
reps. Yeah, you got to get them in. No, that's a great
So
that's great advice. And I think um again, how did you navigate that? And I love the advice of like finding a local community and people that can
yeah,
sort of mentor you through the process. But how important is it to you that again, the people in these rooms are people that don't look, think, act, love, like the people that we typically see getting these
yeah,
funds or being in these rooms? Because as you mentioned earlier, this really does have a trickle down effect to not only just the technology, but how we all function in society. As I
yeah.
mean, that's a
It
whole
does.
yeah,
It
it's
does. No,
huge.
I mean, I think through this process, what I've realized is there are a very minute number of people who fully direct the direction of commerce,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
who make the decision over what gets funded and what doesn't. I
Hmm.
think there's some exciting new legislation that would lower the threshold for an individual to become an what do you call it, a qualified angel investor.
Hmm.
So right now you have to have a pretty high net worth to be an investor, sort of qualified investor in the US. And that threshold right now may be getting lowered. So that's things like that are exciting. That means more diverse investors will start to invest. I think for women, I'm talking more societal change now,
Yeah,
okay?
sure.
But we
Yeah.
should watch, like, there's a great new documentary called Show Her the Money.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I'm gonna write that down,
and
Katie.
yeah, and depending on when this podcast goes live,
Yeah.
I might be featured in a new docu-series on this topic too, out of
Oh,
A&E Networks,
congratulations. That's
which should be
awesome.
crazy. But like, I
Uh-huh.
think that's gonna be that I'm not even, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I'm gonna say anyway. And sometime this year, that's gonna go live, and it's
Okay.
so there's more conversation going on about this problem of the
Hmm.
lack of investment in people of color, in women of color, and in women in general.
Hmm.
And so watch Show Her the Money, show it to all of your people in your in
Yeah.
your network, right?
Yeah.
And then just like with anything, right? For someone who's a first-time college student, navigating that ecosystem
Mm.
is so hard and so
Yeah.
alienating, and you have to learn the discourse and you have to learn the expectations of it. And with that comes the power and the possibility to open new career paths for you.
Hmm.
And that's how I felt going through this process. I think I felt like I'm wanting to learn their language. I want to understand how they make decisions and respect how they think, because it's really eye opening, and it helps me see and know what they need from me. And so I would say that that's key to the process, is embrace that language as quickly as possible. And then I would say be very methodical and don't expect to sort of have a few pitches and you just get funding. Like I was told a few stories of, founders who were in a coffee shop with an investor and they just like wrote him a check. And in the back of my mind, I was in the front of my mind, I thought that won't happen. But we let those stories sit in the back
That's
of our mind.
yeah, you're like,
So
that's definitely gonna happen to me.
I mean, I figured if I did 100, at least one would do.
The probability. Yeah, you're like running the probability in your mind.
But what's fascinating, I would say it's really the whole process for most VCs is a transfer of trust. So
Mm,
once you get one investor to commit,
yeah.
that can really help facilitate the others. There's something real to fear of missing out.
Mm,
And for better or worse, like with a lot of human decision making, it is kind of spent in checking and looking who else is in. Is this, am I the only one going
yeah.
after this?
Yeah.
So, and then I think too, like the biggest, being methodical about it. Don't waste your time talking to investors that fund Series A if you're not making revenue yet and you just have an idea. You should really speak to the investors that fund at your stage, and you can use really great tools that I wish I'd known about a lot earlier, like NFX Signal is a
Mhm.
great tool for finding out who are the investors that invest in what stage of your company, if you're pre-seed or seed or Series A, and what areas do they focus on if you're in fintech versus some other kind, anyway, it just really helps you hone in on that and then leverage your network. So it's not that
Mm,
it's not important to build relationships with people who don't fund at your level. It is important because everyone knows everyone in
yeah.
the investor world.
Hmm.
I would say focus your time on the people who fund at your stage, but build relationships with others so that you can get champions. You need
Yeah.
people like there's a famous saying that if you ask someone for money, they'll give you advice. And if you ask someone for advice, they'll give you money. And I
Yeah.
think
That's a good one.
I learned that the advice piece was so critical that I really had to listen and I had to show over time that I was paying attention and implementing what they were saying.
Hmm.
And that has led to, I think, my strongest investor relationships over time because they saw that I was malleable to like learning from what they knew. Because
Yeah.
many of them had been founders
Mm.
themselves and had either scaled a company or failed at a company. And so they have powerful stories to share.
There's the power of storytelling, Katie. There it is.
Exactly.
Fun.
Yeah, it's
Coming
so
full
true.
circle. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we do have like a series of rapid fire questions. They're fun.
Oh my
But
gosh.
before we
So
do that,
nervous.
is there anything else that you want to add about Narratize or AI that I didn't ask you? Anything that you were kind of hoping to talk
No,
about?
no, this is wonderful. I would say just please engage with Narratize. Like go
Hmm.
to narratize.com, follow us on LinkedIn, follow me, Katie Trauth Taylor on LinkedIn, and we can share each other's journeys in all of this new world.
That's awesome. Thanks, Katie. We'll include links to all that in the show notes too, so people can just find you pretty easily. Okay, so our rapid fire questions. What is your all-time favorite story? And that can be in any form, book, movie, song, the many forms of story.
Oh my gosh.
I know this is hard.
It's so hard. You know, one of my favorite stories is actually the story of crust white strips and how it got invented. It was like there was a scientist at Procter and Gamble who was working with Glad press and seal, and there was another scientist working on tooth whitening, and they
Uh-huh.
happened to be in the cafeteria at the same time
Oh no.
eating lunch, and they're talking about it, and it like the light bulb goes off between the two of them and
Oh,
they
I love
run
that.
literally like holding hand like imagine this. They're like running back to the lab to like paste tooth whitening into the
Onto the
Glad press and
strip.
seal. And then
Oh,
he like
wow.
the guy puts it on his teeth and he walks into his boss's office and he says like, "Look."
Look
And he's like, "What am I don't see anything." He's like,
Oh no, that is a really awesome story. And like to your point, how important it is to like figure out how to communicate clearly, succinctly, quickly, so that when there are those opportunities in lunchroom, you're just like sometimes those happen very organically, but that's an awesome
"Yes."
story. I love it.
Yeah, I love it for all those reasons.
Hmm.
It's filled with detail. It reminds me of the power of innovation storytelling and the power of being, open and being
Yes.
cross-disciplinary and seeing
Yeah.
across and between divisions, which is what we do as storytellers. So I
Yes.
love
Yeah.
that
Oh,
stuff.
I love that too. Thank you. Okay, then the second question is, what's the best piece of advice you've heard about storytelling you want all of us to know, or the worst advice you've ever heard about storytelling that you feel like you need to warn us about?
I think the best advice is to always remember storytelling has such a powerful impact on empathy.
Mm,
It's not just in hearing it, it's in collecting it, in the listening.
mm,
And, you know, the back in the VA days, for me, they ran this initiative that ended up getting all kinds of cool press called My VA, My Story. And they
mm.
deployed story collectors to go sit at the bedside of patients and
Wow.
just listen to their personal story. Then they went a next step and they took that like 500 word personal story and they put it into the electronic health record. And
Wow.
the doctors and nurses who read it, their provider empathy increased,
Of course it
and the
did. Yeah.
patients, their medication treatment adherence increased. So they were more likely to do what that provider said and have a better health outcome because of it. Just because they shared their experience in World War, in the
Yeah.
Vietnam War or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, just I think that's my favorite lesson about storytelling is it's not just about the telling, it's about the listening, it's about the
Mhm.
sharing, the human connection that's made possible through that, and then it can actually have outcomes on very real, like, things that we like to
Yeah.
say are just science or
Yeah.
just data, when they're
Mhm.
not. They are absolutely still always and forever human.
Yes, I love Katie, thank you. That was a beautiful answer. Thank you. Kind of dovetails very nicely into the last
It's a
one
great
of these
question.
questions, which is, how do you define storytelling in your own words?
Oh gosh. Oh, no, you're putting me on the spot. Um
I'm so glad this hasn't happened to me yet.
I mean, I'm probably really a lot more, like, nerdy and scientific about it than the average bear.
That's cool. That's why you're here, Katie. That's why I want to hear. Yeah.
I mean, like, for innovation storytelling, we define it as the art and science of communicating strategic improvements, and new product developments, and I think,
Mm,
like, in order to drive innovation forward. So I guess storytelling alone is the art and science of connecting people through the human experience through narrative
mhm.
for hopefully for good, always and forever targeted towards the good.
I love that. Also a very beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time. I feel like I could
you.
have talked to you for much longer,
I
but I
know.
really
We
appreciate your
will.
insight. Again, and I think this whole world of artificial intelligence giving us the your perspective has been very valuable today. I know it will be for listeners. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for making time, and it's not every day I get to hang out and vibe with other storytellers, so I love it.
Thanks so much,
Thanks for
Katie.
having me.
We're so glad you've listened to this podcast episode. If you liked it, would you mind doing us a favor? Share this episode with someone who would be interested in the topic too. We're on a mission to help everyone become a better storyteller. And don't forget to subscribe to the show to get updated every time we release a new episode. Each and every episode is produced, hosted, and edited by us, Meg and Kyle Adams at Home Place Creative. Happy storytelling!